All right, nobody loves a list the way I do, so there's no such thing as way too early power rankings, not even 2 weeks removed from Game 7 of the NBA Finals. NBA writer Colin Ward-Henninger has his rankings up on CBSSports.com right now with trades, the draft, and free agency all factored in. And Colin joins us now on HQ. All right, Colin, the Thunder finished the season on top. You have them ranked number 1 right now going into next season. Maybe no surprise, but no additions, also no subtractions really for the defending champs. And so is this just built on last year's success?
Yeah, absolutely. And the key phrase there is no subtractions. I mean, this team is built for long-term success. And if you talk about a team that just won the NBA title, this is the youngest team in the NBA. I mean, they were the second youngest team to ever win the NBA title. So it's not like, oh no, they need to make some changes, bring in some new pieces. Like, all these guys are getting better, right? Jalen Williams is an all-NBA player. He's only hitting the cusp of his prime. You've got a guy like Chet Holmgren who only has a handful of NBA games under his belt. He's only going to get better. And then, of course, you talk about the MVP, the league's leading scorer, the finals MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Oh, hey, guess what? He turns 27 next week. He's not even in his prime yet. So this team is built for success. I don't think you really have to worry about anything in terms of, oh no, they didn't change the roster. They have the formula. It's the all-world, all-historical defense that they have, coupled with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's absolute majesty on the offensive end. They have a system that's going to continue to win regular season NBA games. You want to talk about the playoffs? Okay, they were pushed to a Game 7 a couple times. Who knows what happens if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't get hurt? However, the regular season, this team is going to be an absolute juggernaut again. I don't think you have anything to worry about if you're an Oklahoma City fan.
Yeah, scary thought for the rest of the NBA. And Colin, so much of that Thunder roster built through the draft with an embarrassment of first-round picks that the franchise has acquired over the years. The Knicks got roasted pretty good in what seemed like a directionless search at times for their next head coach after firing Tom Thibodeau. Now they've hired former 2-time NBA Coach of the Year Mike Brown. You have them 3rd overall. That's up a couple of spots. What do you like about the Brown hire and, of course, maybe the addition of a guy like Jordan Clarkson?
Yeah, I think, Mike Brown, you mentioned the search was kind of hilarious at times. They kept asking for permission to interview other teams' head coaches. And of course, they were like, no, we're not doing that. But they ended up with Mike Brown, who, I've spent a lot of time around Mike Brown. He was a Golden State assistant. I'm out here in the Bay Area. And then, of course, the head coach of the Sacramento Kings led that incredible turnaround where they made the playoffs for the first time in 16 years. It obviously went south after that. But, I think a lot of people around the league think that the firing of Mike Brown was really unjust. So for the Knicks to get a guy like him, you talk about a 180 here. Tom Thibodeau is this doom and gloom kind of dark cloud walking into every room. Mike Brown's the exact opposite. You won't meet one person who has talked to this guy, met this guy, who has one bad word to say about Mike Brown. Incredibly upbeat, incredibly positive, and I think that's kind of the change that the Knicks were looking for here. Clearly the attitude, maybe he had lost that locker room a little bit, and talking about Tom Thibodeau. So to bring in a guy who's kind of a player's coach, an upbeat guy, is maybe the change they're looking for. And then if you're talking about X's and O's, you mentioned Jordan Clarkson. They want a guy who's going to use their bench a little bit more. They also added Gershon Yabusele over the offseason. So those are two pieces, proven bench players who can come in and contribute. And I think Mike Brown will make a little bit better use of them. And also a little more creativity offensively. Mike Brown was the head coach of a team, a Sacramento Kings team, that had the best offense in the league a couple seasons ago. So not just Jalen Brunson pick and roll every single time. We're going to mix things up. We're going to have a little more player movement, a little more ball movement. So I think those were the reasons that they went with Mike Brown. And in terms of the Knicks being number 3, it's really, addition by subtraction. The Celtics are out of there. The Pacers are moving down because of injuries. So I think the Knicks, number 3 spot is legit, but it's also because of some injuries in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, a couple of reasons right there why a lot of people are saying the East feels wide open, although I know you have the Cavs 1 spot ahead of the Knicks in your power rankings. One of Mike Brown's former teams, the Lakers, made a move to fill a need at center by signing DeAndre Ayton this week. LeBron opted in. Luka is looking slim, but LA is sliding in these rankings. Why?
Well, I mean, if you look at the teams around them and what they've done, the Houston Rockets added Kevin Durant, stole Dorian Finney-Smith from them, got a couple bench pieces. You look at a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves coming off another Western Conference Finals run. The Lakers are fine, But it was proven last offseason that they simply just didn't have enough pieces to compete in the playoffs. And when you look at what they've done this offseason, look, DeAndre Ayton, it depends on how you want to look at it, right? Glass half full, glass half empty. Former #1 pick, a guy who was helpful on a Phoenix Suns team that went to the NBA Finals, but also a guy who basically got run out of town in Phoenix, a guy who the Portland Trailblazers just decided to pay to leave because they didn't want him around. He's kind of like, one of those streaming shows that you watch and you watch the pilot and you're like, oh my God, this show's amazing, I love it. And then episode 2 is like, okay, it's not as good as the first one. And then by episode 4, you're like, why am I still watching this? That's what DeAndre Ayton has been throughout his career. So I think the first 20 games are going to be great for the Lakers. He's super athletic, totally skilled, but tends to lose that effort as the season goes on. So we'll see how that goes. And then of course there's the LeBron James thing that's just hanging over everything. He opted into that contract, that $52 million. He didn't extend. A lot of the Lakers moves, reportedly they're operating. They're saying we don't want anything that's more than 2 years out. This team is building around Luka Doncic, and LeBron James has never been in this situation in his career. He's never been on an expiring contract. He's always had extensions or long-term contracts. So word around the league is that there's a high likelihood that the Lakers are going to look around in terms of trades for LeBron James, which sounds crazy. But if they are building towards the future, if they looked around and said, look, the Western Conference has gotten better, we haven't been able to add any meaningful pieces, maybe a LeBron James trade is really the only way to go here and build around the slimmer Luka Doncic for the future.
Man, even age gets the greatest of the greats at one point or another. All right, Colin, the Celtics might look more different than any other playoff team from last season. Holiday and Porzingis are out. Anthony Simons is in. And, of course, Jason Tatum could miss all of next season with that Achilles injury. Where do you have Boston considering all of that and some apparent uncertainty with guys like Jaylen Brown and Derek White?
Yeah, it's crazy to see the Celtics drop. I mean, they're perennially #1 or 2 in these power rankings for the last few years, and suddenly they're down in the teens just because not only Jason Tatum's injury, which obviously would have knocked them down a few pegs, but we thought the Celtics were going to make some moves, right? Maybe trade one of Drew Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis. No, we're getting them both out of the door immediately. Luke Cornett's gone. Who knows what the future holds for Jaylen Brown and Derek White? If those guys are on the team, they're still going to be really competitive. They're well coached. They're a really good team, but losing those pieces obviously takes them out of the top of the Eastern Conference in terms of contention. So that opens the door for teams like the Cavs, the Knicks, etc. So adding a guy like Anthony Simons, I think that's a good piece for them. I think he's a good player and might thrive in their system. But when you talk about the losses that they had in terms of Holiday, Porzingis, and possibly Tatum for the whole season, adding Anthony Simons, I just don't think is going to be enough.
Yeah, and I like Simons maybe more than others who just call him a gunner or a scorer. He's a really good young player. All right, if there's one team that is ultimately banking on health being the big difference maker between 2024 and 2025, it may very well be the Sixers, and Philly is your biggest riser on this list.
Well, they have to be. It's not fair. I have to do these power rankings, guessing what's going to happen at the beginning of next season. Of course, if they're healthy, there's not much to say about the 76ers. They have Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey. They just added VJ Edgecombe. They might have a healthy Jared McCain. If those guys are all in the court, they're going to be great. If not, it's going to be a lot of what we saw last season. So it's hard to gauge what the Sixers are, but you can't forget that if all those guys are healthy, if Joel Embiid can play 60 games and be healthy for the playoffs, they're going to be a really competitive team.
Well, that's a big if, but it's a fun if, because you're right, Philly could be a real power in the East if fully healthy. All right, Colin, thank you so much. And you can find Colin's full NBA power rankings on CBSSports.com right now. Here's a look at the odds to win it all next summer. In a line with what Colin says, as the Thunder being the #1 team in all the NBA at +260, followed by the Knicks. Nuggets made a lot of moves in this offseason already, as have the Rockets, both tied there at +850.